In hip hop, mixtapes have historically been one artist rapping over another artist's beats or productions while accompanied by a DJ, like DJ Drama or Green Lantern or etc. But as time went on, things shifted to where the mixtape was more of just kind of loosies or tracks that weren't cleared from samples and just didn't make it to the album. And then eventually to the point where we got these commercial mixtapes, which are essentially albums, but were not marketed as such. But things have changed a little bit, at least it seems like that, with Conway the Machine's latest mixtape, Greetings Earthlings. Welcome to the Bar for Our podcast, and this week I'm talking about mixtapes. So, first things first, this idea of what Conway is doing is not new in the slightest, like I mentioned. For me, when I started really listening to hip hop in the early 2000s, there was a lot of mixtapes. Like you would have Gangsta Grills for damn near everyone. And I mean, I mentioned DJ Green Lantern because that was like he would do some of the mixtape series that I would listen to. But back then, these mixtapes were just an artist, almost always Lil Wayne, rapping over someone else's beats, which was always interesting because you get eventually these mashups of, or like, not mashups, but like, I guess you can call it that, but also just extended versions of the songs where it's like the original song, but then like 17 other people on it because they all decided to rap on that beat. But as time went on, that kind of shifted. And I don't really know why, outside of maybe they just don't want to waste their raps. But as time went on, mixtapes became less popular. And originally, I feel the idea of mixtapes was one, to, get attention on whatever artist is doing the mixtape. I'm going to keep referencing Lil Wayne because, mixtape king. Kinda. But you would have him drop a mixtape, and Lil Wayne's, I guess, an odd choice because he has nothing to prove. Everyone knew he was good at the time, and everyone was listening to Lil Wayne. But for other artists, you have a mixtape to get some attention, and it often made sense to release a mixtape prior to an album, which, would also help draw attention to your project, which also at the time you would get more money from because there are physical copies, really. I mean, yeah, you could go on LimeWire or whatever and download the album, but there was still enough people who were buying physical copies where they could afford to drop a mixtape and then move on to their album. I guess that's also kind of the time where DJ Khaled was super popular too, so that was another way to promote an artist. But I think the main purpose then was, one, get attention, and two, to promote your album. Now, as time went on, that got less common. And I'm sure there's multiple reasons, ranging from sample clearances, because, you can't really just use an artist's beat. But also at the end of the day, if you're not making money off of it, they don't really care. So that gets a little bit weird because you can go on YouTube, put up a beat, or put a freestyle to a beat, but get a copyright strike on it. But also it's like you kind of expect that because you didn't pay for that beat, you're just rapping on it. That's one thing. The other thing is that, they maybe just don't want to waste their raps. Like, they're like, oh, that bar's hard. I'm not gonna give that out for free. I'm gonna put it on the album. That's where people need to hear it. But you also have times where sometimes on the mixtape you go hard, and with a mixtape you have more freedom. I feel like you're able to just kind of do whatever you want. Like expectations for a mixtape are like almost nothing. Like, they're like, all right, well, this is free music. I'm just gonna listen to it. It's gonna be great. or it's not. I mean, it is what it is, but the expectations are way lower than if you were to release an album, which I think also kind of relates to how the shift in mixtape style has arrived. So what I mean by that is, before you had people rapping on other people's beats, but now whenever there's a quote unquote mixtape, it's just brand new production usually, but they're not really they're not going to put it out as an album. And that's where things get weird. So the commercial mixtape, I feel, got really popular around the time TDE was popping. So like, what was it, 2009 at the earliest? So like when you got tapes like Overly Dedicated and damn, I'm just blanking on Absol's tapes, but like those tapes were sold on iTunes, but they were mixtapes. Like they're not meant to be considered albums because, for one reason or another. But that, now that I think about it, that also gets a little bit weird because part of the reason you release music as a mixtape is because it's free and you can get around sample clearances. Like, yeah, I'm not making any money off of it, so why do I have to get it cleared? But if you're if you're selling it, then you kind of got to get the samples cleared anyway. But that's another thing entirely. But with that shift to commercial mixtapes, it's almost like the expectations were higher, and because the expectations were higher, you had to put out, like, you had to have beats that were really good, and you had to have, well, you didn't have to, but there were times where you had to have like a concept to it. At the same time, though, you did have other artists who were still making mixtapes, but not selling it, if that makes sense. So, I mean, the biggest example for me personally was Big Crit. Big Crit was putting out mixtapes forever. I think Catalactica was his first official album, and everything prior to that was essentially a free mixtape that you could get. And that one was different, or that era was different for him, I believe, because one, he was trying to promote his raps, but he was also promoting his production, because almost everything that was put out was his like self-produced stuff. So that's a little bit different, I guess. Which, kind of leads me into the idea that there's no strict definition of a mixtape. Like, you can have a mixtape where you're rapping on someone else's beats, but you could also have a mixtape where it's just you rapping, which totally valid too. Like, there's no right way to do it. There's no right way to do anything in music. But that shift, I'm not too sure where it came from or why it came up. And maybe it was just at the time there weren't as many beats that people wanted to rap on. But then, like, if you think about it, in when Lil Wayne dropped the Carter 3, Kanye jumped on, like, that was like when Kanye was jumping on a bunch of remixes, which you could almost consider kind of like a mixtape idea. I mean, it was never released, or he never released a mixtape in that sense, but, he jumped on Lollipop and did a remix to that, and eventually it became official, I guess. But that sort of thing is still around, where people are just going to hop on and do a freestyle, but as a whole tape, that's not really a thing. But again, instead they kind of go the commercial mixtape or project route. Like, artists are really afraid to use the idea or the term album, I feel, which it makes sense, because when you have an album, there's a lot more pressure. Like I mentioned with mixtapes, you can kind of do whatever you want. Like, the expectations are almost nothing. But if you're dropping an album, people expect a certain level. Now, aside from TD and Big Crit, Griselda has also been doing mixtapes forever. Like, most of what we hear from Griselda prior to What Machine Gun Do was essentially mixtapes. And I don't know at what point exactly they decided to shift it from mixtape to album. Like, it's weird, because I'm pretty sure everything prior to What Machine Gun Do was considered mixtape, but now for example, West Side Gun dropped Hitler Wears Hermes 8. Like, that was technically a mixtape series, but now it's an album, I guess. Like, at least that's what he's considering an album. So, I mean, that's where it gets a little bit weird. Maybe they just kind of got to the point where they're like, nah, this is an album. We want to get recognized as an album for this. But with Griselda and even Big Crit's album, or mixtapes, sorry, they were definitely more, like, not conceptual, but they were sequenced in a way that it felt like an album. Like, a lot of times when you hear mixtapes, they're just thrown in together, right? With an album, there's a proper sequence. Like, I mean, that's, I think, one of the main pillars of an album. Like, it has to flow well from track to track. So you have these mixtapes from Griselda and Big Crit, and I know others for sure, but they don't really follow the typical mixtape format where it's just a bunch of random songs. Each song really flows well into the next one and generally carries the same sort of theme throughout the project. So, you know, again, there's no rules to it. Like, everyone can kind of do whatever they want with mixtapes and albums. This brings me to more recent times. Like, I know I said Griselda, like, and as if they're not super recent, but, you know, like, the last year or so. We have Tyler, the Creator, who dropped Call Me If You Get Lost with DJ Drama, which, as I mentioned, is, you know, one of the major players in the mixtape scene. And DJ Drama is well known for the Gangsta Grills series of tapes. This, I think, started to bring back that sort of vibe. So the vibe being, you have the DJ or producer on the track as well. Like, you hear DJ Drama yelling all the time, but also just, you know, just saying things throughout the project, almost as if he's like a hype man of sorts. And that's, I think, kind of the idea. But that sort of idea started to come back very quickly. And I don't want to say like anyone copied anyone, because it's entirely possible that they came up with this idea around the same time. But, you know, on Hitler Wears Hermes, I forget the exact track, but I think it was on side B. But, you know, you have kind of like the mixtape shouts. Like, I forget the term now, but, you know, like, you have the DJ yelling on the track and just, you know, doing commentary, which I personally like. I just love that, because it brings a different level of hype to the album, and it's kind of like a live reaction video. Like, you have someone in the booth yelling and reacting as the project is playing, and that makes you more hyped, because you're like, oh my god, they're so excited for this album, I'm excited. But, you know, it's weird, like that. I remember, like, back in the day, like, I didn't really care for that as much, but now I'm like, nah, nostalgia, I need it. Which brings me to Conway the Machine's project, which he just dropped, Greetings Earthlings. This takes pretty much every element of a mixtape that I've mentioned, being other artists' production, the DJs, and a mix of his own stuff, like stuff that's specifically to Conway. Like, you have so many tracks on here, like, basically, you know, the beginning, Devil in a Reject Hoodie, we know the beat. Greetings is a J. Cole beat. Family Ties, the Baby Keem track. Jail. Like, all these tracks are very new. Like, they're all new-ish production, which no one, at least to my knowledge, has really done a mixtape with newer beats. Like, a lot of the beats that we've been getting, or, you know, back when mixtapes were super common, you know, they were stuff from then, like production from then. Then as time went on, you know, like I said, they started shifting to, you know, different production, like not using other people's beats, which, you know, that's fine. But this return to a proper mixtape, like with the, you know, I'm going to use someone else's beats, is exciting. Like, obviously, we get freestyles like on radio shows all the time. Like, you'll have people who jump on people's beats on Sway in the Morning or Power 106. Like, that's normal. But to get it in a project with the DJ shouts and everything, like, I like it. And now I also mentioned that there's a bit of that, I guess, new mixtape style where it's your particular song. And yeah, we got that with Piano Love and John Wooflick on that project as well. And I don't know, it's like, it's such a good blend of everything, I feel. And also, like I mentioned, like sometimes people would drop a mixtape to build hype for an album. Throughout this project, you have him, like, you have the DJ mentioning God Don't Make Mistakes coming out February 25th. And it's like, if you don't know by the end of this mixtape that an album's coming, you're not listening. Like, there is a mixtape coming, goddammit. You're gonna listen to it. Or sorry, an album. And it's great. I'm gonna talk about the mixtape itself a little bit now, before I forget about it. But, you know, Conway is one of those rappers that he puts a lot of himself into his music, and it's weird. It's like, it feels like he opens up even more on this mixtape. Like, there's times where he's just talking about how he's just been depressed and like things that he's been doing to kind of deal with it. And I mean, Conway's not a particularly young man. I believe he's almost 40 if he's not in his 40s. So he's seen a lot through his years. And I mean, we've gotten bits of this on previous projects as well, where he's, you know, talking about his personal life. But it's very interesting to see that he's being this open on a mixtape. But also, it's not surprising because that's kind of how Conway is, right? Like, the reason I say it's kind of surprising is because, you know, you want the mixtape to be a way to hype people up. And when you're open about all the, I guess, sadder things in life on a mixtape, I don't know that people really want to be like, oh man, I'm gonna go listen to that album now, I guess. Like, I think people are gonna be a little bit more reluctant. I mean, assuming it's an artist that no one's ever heard. But I mean, I could be wrong too. Like, some people just like that music. Like, I get it. I know how it is. But it's interesting to say the least. Now, like I mentioned, I don't want to say that anyone's copying anyone, but I do want to say that I think Tyler's brought this idea back. Because also, I haven't listened to it, but DJ Drama did a tape with Jim Jones recently. Like, which is just great because, you know, Jim Jones was really popular. I mean, he's still popular, but I guess the height of his career, if you want to say it, was around that mixtape era. And for him to come back and do a mixtape with DJ Drama is just great, and it feels right. I've heard good things, I just didn't actually listen to it yet. But, you know, it's almost got people wanting this this idea of mixtapes back. Like, there's definitely an audience for it. But I think the biggest issue right now is that there's no real easy way to stream mixtapes, at least in my mind. I know if you're on iOS, you can just download it and it's in your music library more easily. But if you're on Android, like I am, like, you don't really have a music player that can kind of throw all your music into. Like, it's not easy. So, like, if you are someone who streams primarily, like I do, I would prefer if I can get my music into that streaming service's library, like just for myself on my phone rather than having to go through my computer, because extra steps. I don't like that. So if you have an idea to make DatPiff better, or maybe get them a proper streaming player, because I'm not gonna lie, when I tried to download the mixtape last night, it took, like, because I was gonna listen to it on my computer first. It took so long for that webpage to load. Like, it was absurd. I'm like, bro, are there, like, did Conway break DatPiff? Or is DatPiff always this slow? And then I remember DatPiff is kind of slow sometimes. Especially when someone drops a mixtape. The app surprisingly went pretty smooth, but honestly, like, I prefer a better player for that. So, I mean, I'll find some way to do it. But it's interesting. Like, there's enough of an audience that it kind of slowed their site down. Like, they got so much traffic. So there's still an audience out there, and I think if there's some way to make it easier for people to get into mixtapes, they're gonna regain popularity, like, significantly. Because, like I mentioned, if you're on iOS, or even back in the day when we had iPods and MP3 players, like, with MP3 players, you have to have all your music downloaded onto the device anyway, so you have all your music downloaded already. With streaming, you can't really download it and put it into a different, like, app or whatever. At least not easily or legally. But it just the fact that the mixtapes are not, you can't integrate it into your music library very easily unless you're on iOS and use Apple Music. Like, it's very inconvenient, to say the least. Yeah, so I rambled a bunch. This is the point where I would normally have songs to showcase, but I don't have anything right now. Mostly because I wanted to get all this mixtape stuff off my brains before I forgot it all. Like, there's just so much happening in terms of, like, this possibility. Like, the possibility of a mixtape resurgence is very exciting to me. Like, yeah, we've been getting Lil Wayne doing mixtapes still. Like, that's fine. And, like, other people have been doing mixtapes as well. But, like, we're getting mixtapes from an artist that already has a lot of attention on him. Like, it's like, you don't have to do this, but you did. And that's what I like. Like, you're putting out music for the fans, but also, like, you're showcasing that you can rap on other beats. Like, with Conway specifically and Griselda, like, there's a Griselda sound, right? But with this mixtape, you have him rapping on so much, like, such a variety of sounds. Like, I think that really also showcases how good of a rapper you can be. Like, just being able to rap on any beat. But I'm excited to see what happens with the potential mixtape future. Like, it's exciting, to say the least. But with all that said, I'm going to stop it there because I've talked enough about mixtapes. I think I got my point across. But if you haven't listened to that Conway the Machine mixtape, definitely do so. I'll link it in the description if I don't forget. Also, let me know what you thought of that mixtape and the idea that mixtapes might be coming back. Also, like and subscribe if you want to see more ramblings like this. Thank you for watching, and please stay safe out there.